People, thanks for coming. You all know Patrick a lot better than I do. I run Palewell Press. We publish books about human rights and the environment. And I know Patrick, and he said, would you publish my next collection? And it's been a really good journey finding out about his poetry. There's a lot in the book which I absolutely love. And he let me put the absolute top favourite of mine at the very end. So when you look at it, you'll know that's why that's there. But I think what comes through with Patrick is his love of humanity and justice. And this book is a real treat. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. We're going to have some open micers, then Patrick will read, then we'll have an interval, and you can have a drink and put some money in for the nurses and buy a book. They are £8 today, reduced from their normal £8.99. And that's all I really need to say. Over to you, your friend.
Thanks, Camilla. I'd like to say that I feel really honoured to be published by Palewell Press, and Camilla's been an extremely sensitive editor throughout the process, and so I think it's been a very harmonious, I like to think, relationship in the months we've been working together. So I'm really delighted that the book is finally, the baby is finally born, and here it is.
Back to read, and you're in for a real treat. I do hope you're going to read some of the stuff about refugees, because you know that's really dear to my heart. But there's a lot of very beautiful poems in here, as well as serious ones. And having spent the last 2 years longing for a summer holiday, I've been particularly intrigued by the stuff about Lesbos and melons and all the lovely summery feeling that you've got in that part of the book. So over to you, and looking forward to it.
Before I start reading, I'm just going to explain quickly why we have this bucket here. The pub doesn't charge us for hiring the room, which is quite unusual, but they ask us to encourage the audience to put any spare change in this bucket for Macmillan's nurses. So there you are, that's why we're doing this. It's part of the nice arrangement with this pub. So, thank you for that lovely introduction, Camilla, and I thought I'd start the evening by doing a bit of good old-fashioned Brexit bashing, and then move on from there. So this is the Fools. The Leavers celebrate with Belgian lager, flick through brochures for a now more costly Spanish holiday, plan a day trip to Boulogne for booze and baccy while they can. The fools were lied to, but they didn't stop to think. Now they take to drink and mourn their sinking nation, Europe's embarrassing relation. Rule Britannia, just an empty slogan. At rainbow's end, no gold, just icy isolation. So wave goodbye to Scotland and to Ireland, those sensible folk who voted in, leaving England and Wales to down another gin, no tonic for their sin. The party's over, the hangover begun, time to bag up all the junk. Common sense has done a bunk. When all is said and done, we're sunk. Refugee. Refugee is living in fear every second of every day. Refugee is seeing your children killed, terrified for the ones that live. Refugee is realizing that escape is a place with no name. Refugee is fleeing with just a suitcase and your loved ones. Refugee is losing all you own, your home, its memories. Refugee is giving your money to a gangster, letting that gangster risk your life in a leaky boat. Refugee is the jubilation of survival as you scrabble onto dry land. Refugee is the kindness of islanders offering shelter and warmth. Refugee is continuing your journey on a pitiless road, bullet-faced men guarding razor wire fences. Refugee is watching a continent pull up its drawbridge. Refugee is freezing camps in winter, all dignity stripped away. Refugee is wicked politicians peddling a currency of hate. Refugee is the miracle of completing the obstacle course. Refugee is being lifted by strong hands, warm words soothing as balm. Welcome friend, welcome home, come share our land. This is a poem about something my parents liked to do together, and it's called Time and the Man. My father was an electrician. My mother bought broken clocks at jumble sales. My father mended them, spent hours fiddling with the mechanisms, uncoiling the stuck springs. With his sharp electrician's eye and nimble fingers used to separating wires, he pried apart the innards until discovering the secret hurt at the heart of time. Hours later at tea time, we tiptoed in, found him trance-like, hand-cupped to the mechanism, released from its cage of inactivity, tick-tocking rhythmically, majestically, setting time going as shadows crossed the room, and we longed for our Saturday sausages and the coming of the moon. My family are from Ireland, and on balmy summer holidays, as memory seems to tell us, we spent a lot of time in County Sligo in a place called Tubbacurry, where my grandparents lived. So this is picking mushrooms in Tubbacurry. We fetched a bucket to the field, rain sparkling in hedgerows, began picking dew-fresh gold, luscious fungi, free as the western air, teasing my grandmother's house. Atlantic girlishly tossing her white caps as we returned ripe with treasure, stoked the fire with peat, placed a brimming pan on the hob, mushrooms wallowing in a scoop of dripping, breakfast served with soda bread, butter melting into pale streams. My uncle ate from the frying pan, smoked for a while, then took his keen-edged spade down to the turf. A life lived without telephone or television, radio or papers, only gossip for news. Content in its natural rhythms, ceilidh, church-going hymns. And naturally, when Seamus Heaney died, I felt it bereft, as though one of the main pillars of poetry had crumbled and fallen into the sea. And so this is Lament for Seamus. As summer passed, so did you, leaving as you always did, a generous space for others. Once I saw you read in London, a benign god descended from the mountain, coupling links of the human chain. Your work travelled well. In Florence we sat up late, drinking wine, entranced by your voice and Liam's piping. Poems that lingered in the night, causing me to rise at dawn, pen my own verse, giddy with the richness of language found. And now, sad day, I come home, weighed down with groceries, hear your name on the news, which cannot be good news. What's a poet doing amid the lunchtime wars and warring? You are gone, and now forever here, leaving us alone with summer's beauty, the certain truth you fashioned from your poetry. This next poem is called The Darkest Stars, and it's a poem about the persecution that continues of Tibetan people by the Chinese, and in particular it's about the fact that since 2011 at least 150 Tibetans have self-immolated in Tibet and China. Many of them are young monks or nuns, and most of them died from their injuries. So this is The Darkest Stars, and a Chinese friend of mine has set this to music as well. Through these flames we seek freedom, our immolated flesh singeing darkest stars. Our voice is speaking, listeners recoil at this challenge to our rude imprisonment, the scorching of our precious soil, our exiled leaders' eloquent resistance. As the new year turns, spare a prayer for us, set it spinning on your wheel, understand our desperate plea, our reddening anger, our white-hot steel. time ago I moved down to the coast to Folkestone, and for the first time in many, many years I've got a garden, and this is a poem about the sheer visceral pleasure of standing outside in the nature, as it were, sawing wood. I can't remember why I was sawing wood, but it seemed like a nice thing to do at the time. Sawing wood. I'm sawing wood and humming a poem, while snails gather expectantly, wondering if sawdust might be tasty as it looks. I'm in the garden sawing wood, under a clear sky, while the elderflower tree bends inquiringly towards the noise, and the neighbours' doors stay shut. Keeping the morning to myself, I saw away contentedly. Ka-plunk goes another plank, and the secret slow worm wonders if it's safe to emerge. A poet sawing wood is not what he bought into when he chose this patch of earth. A poet sawing wood, humming a poem to himself, while all the gull cawing world goes spinning round, and the chalky earth is firm for now, and the almost silent almost sound. Bill, who owns the pub, is going to come in and join us. Drinks down all round after. I was listening to the radio recently, and there was a number of women discussing their weddings, and one woman said, well, I like the traditional kind of wedding, you know, long white dress, you know, village country church. And this other woman piped up and she said, well, I got married in Bermuda shorts and gold trainers. She sounds interesting. But she didn't pop up on the programme anymore, so I thought I was going to have to invent a life for her. So I have someone somewhere in gold trainers. She married in Bermuda shorts and gold trainers after drinking all night with Cuban musicians. Then it was honeymoon time. 2 weeks in a van, Europe speeding by, mountains and lakes cupping the moon. They toured Africa, taught reading, writing, bareback riding. Children came along like buses, though never three at once. Summer tapped on the door, baubles hung at Christmas, snow melted beside ambitions. Dreams became muddy as cow pies, the Bermuda shorts hung out to dry. Still, there were nights of Cuba music, golden rum chasing the beat. It was memory time. Someone, somewhere, in gold trainers, turning the corner, pressing a doorbell, smiling into the surprise of a beautiful new friend. Now this next poem is sort of self-commissioned. A little while ago we did a show at Merton Abbey Mills, the Colour House Theatre, which is in Colliers Wood, and it's right next to the place where William Morris started his factory in the 19th century. So this is our neighbour Bill. And of course I lived there as well in that area, so it felt very present all the time I was there. Here where we are tonight, William Morris set the world alight, producing textiles for discerning homes, some whose furniture included thrones. The Queen hung his paper in Balmoral, rankling with the great man's morals. All the time his socialist heart insisted workers should share his art. He believed that wealth caused sin and set the right to story out how capital would take a route. In News from Nowhere, Dream of John Ball, he showed how power would take a fall. By the Wandle, he created jobs for human beings, not cogs. Kelmscott Manor, the Red House, designed to show beauty and utility together go. Marxist realist, friend of Engels, medieval dreamer, political schemer, skillful weaver of art and verse, our neighbour Bill was all these things. Sharing life with passionate friends, Rossetti, Janey and Burne-Jones, so much talent in these few homes. How many lives did William lead? Enough to write 2 epic poems, The Earthly Paradise, The Golden Loom, and splendid versions of Nordic tales set dancing to a mighty tune. He formed the Art Workers Guild, the Socialist League, permitting art to live, ideas to breathe. Rich was the work, but time was thin. No man of flesh fit so much in. Dead at 58. A physician said he died of being William Morris, I think, not pleurisy gout or too much drink. There goes a man who never stopped till time's winged chariot called a halt. On Wander's banks he laid his schemes. Tonight we honour William's dreams. The river rolling through his life belongs to you, as he hoped and knew that liberty should make us proud. Let's say it here, let's say it loud, and raise a glass to William Morris, a roaring lion with a poet's kiss. Camilla mentioned the poems I've written in Lesbos, and Ruth and I, my wife here, have been going there for many years now, and it never loses its charm and beauty. It's the island, of course, where Sappho apparently invented the lyric poem, and of course recently it's been in the news because a lot of refugees have made it their first stop and they've been leaving Asia Minor. But these poems are not really about those things exactly. We spent a week in Mytilene in December and arrived there in the middle of a storm, and the road was flooded with water. And I thought of a line from Sappho, fragment 16, "And I long and yearn." So this is the poem that resulted, called The Falling. The cleansing rain falls and falls and falls, a rush of joyous noise. The street is a river into which we step gingerly, clutching wine and candles and water. How I have longed for such simplicity, everything torn away, fallen, the apple uneaten. This is called Birthday in Mytilene. Mytilene is the capital of the island. It's also an alternative name for Lesbos. On your birthday we drank tea in the harbour cafe, watched fishing boats glide to sea, the church's onion dome pinking in sunlight, a bird flying carelessly across the sky. Into our tea we dunked biscuits shaped like teaspoons. And this final poem in this trilogy is called Colony, which is an inland town in Lesbos. It's a Greek town. It's where the Greek people go to carry out their business and go to school and go to the supermarket and so on, and live. And we went there one afternoon not realising that the Colony has a siesta, unlike the places on the tourist coasts. But it was lovely because we sat in a cafe drinking coffee and just listening to the people playing backgammon, and the time passed in a very interesting but slow fashion. So this is Alleyne. The backgammon players are attended to by the kind waitress, her smile sweetening their coffee, her slim frame slipping between wreaths of cigarette smoke. The old-timers chew their stubs toothlessly. She has a grace word for each. Time hangs heavy through the siesta, counters and dice clicking to an antique rhythm. A pack of dogs gathers to piss on one motorbike. Click and throw, the serious business of gambling on this slow afternoon. Feeling like the moment before the baddies ride in and the sheriff steps out to meet them. I was brought up a Catholic, and I went to a Catholic school called Thomas More, named after the saint, of course, and I didn't think a great deal about him in those days, apart from appearing in a production of A Man for All Seasons at school. But latterly, having read Wolf Hall, and then read that Thomas More, when he was incarcerated in the Tower of London, awaiting his death by being hung, drawn and quartered in 1535, with all his material possessions taken away, all his writing materials taken away, he continued to write poetry using a piece of coal he wrote on the cell wall. So this is More in Sorrow. Denied paper, the prisoner adapted to straitened circumstances, writing with coal, marking his final days on a prison wall. Resolute as befits a coming saint, dipping into principles set out by faith. In faith I bless you 1,000 times, he wrote, for lending me now some leisure to make rhymes. I first rhymed at a school named Thomas More, We had pens and paper, desks to hide behind. We sinners gave little thought to saints, martyred or otherwise, were too busy anticipating the next surprise, shuffled from a teenage deck of cards to spare a prayer for tortured bards. Now to picture a prisoner versifying with coal seemed profound, to hear the scratch of carbon on brick before committing to unyielding ground. Moore wrote less after losing his head, as poets do when newly dead, till comes the resurrection of their reputation, schools named in honour, now there's completion. Staying on the theme of coal, this is a painting by, I don't know if you can see it in this light, but it's a painting by a Belgian artist called Constantijn Muller. He was a painter in the 19th century, and this is a painting of a mine worker, a young woman. And behind the profile of the young woman, if you look at the picture closely, which you can do in the interval, you'll see there's the mining village with the smoke coming out and the conditions that she was living in. And so this is Mine Worker, which is also the title of his painting. Her beauty shines amongst the smoked out terraces, clear eyes, scraped hair, scarf tied above her ears, a kiss curl softening brow, eyebrows arched with dust. She works in darkness but lives in light, a profile suggesting the woman that might be. No privilege, just the hope of not going hungry, of not being under a collapsing roof, a falling beam. The picture's titled Mine Worker, the artist granting her the dignity and strength of one who sees some higher purpose for her class. When labour will have value, fly its flag from a steadier mast. Till then, this girl stays rooted to her landscape, shouting across valleys to the seats of power, fiery reds and muddy blues denoting something yielding, not locked in time. Next week is National Poetry Day on Thursday, and this is a poem I wrote after one recent National Poetry Day on my way home, and I was faced by that terrible question which all poets fear from somebody, which is, what is poetry? So this is National Poetry Day. Taking a cab from the station, I tell the driver I've been at poetry readings all day. What is poetry, he says. Now I'm on the spot. What is poetry? Emboldened by a drink, I say, poetry is music, but words without music. He thinks for a moment. You like music then? Yes, but that's not it, not poetry exactly. He changes gear. We listen to Muzak FM. Poetry is a moment when someone says something so extraordinary, you write it down. I don't say this out loud. That'll be £5, he says, pulling into the curb. Thanks, I say. This is what poetry is all about. I say this out loud, and he recognises a drunk, if ever he's seen one. The artist Anna Mendieta is Cuban. I came across her work at the Hayward Gallery, and she's got an interesting story. She was 13 when she left Cuba. She was sent by her parents to America because they feared the worst of the revolution. But after 20 years she returned to Cuba, and that's where she really found what she wanted to do as an artist. And she wrote a poem, and one of the lines is, "My whole being is filled with want of Cuba." So this is Longing for Cuba. Home after 20 years, the artist fills her heart and art with natural materials, carves sculptures into limestone caves in Yuruco National Park, reactivates Taino goddesses, rescues the black Siboney Venus from an abandoned colonial grave. How the heart longs for homeland, misses the nurture of childhood years, spirited to America at 13, from the flame of revolutionary Cuba into the maw of its bullying neighbour. The artist writes in a poem, "My whole being is filled with want of Cuba." Who can blame her? The teenage hurt of being wrenched from home for the sake of nameless fears She seizes the moment, returns again and again, loves the crocodile-shaped island, bonds with its artist, reclaims her birthright. She writes in that same poem, "The art of thinking is to see ideas grow from root to fruit." The island embraces her energy. She offers it the fire of her youth. Some of you might have been wondering why the new collection is called The Ghost of Franz Kafka. So I'm going to read that poem now. And it means quite a lot to me, but one explanation is that Ruth and I spent our honeymoon in Prague there 4 years ago, and we went in midsummer, and the weather was sort of more like midwinter. So there was this ghostly, sepulchral atmosphere in the city, especially when we visited Franz Kafka's house. And I had this feeling that he was somehow everywhere, including haunting the corridors of our hotel. So this is The Ghost of Franz Kafka. The ghost of Kafka enters the room where the poet and his wife are sleeping. He casts a spell and they're forever changed, married in their dreams on the river Vltava. The boat stops under the Charles Bridge. A flame-haired woman recites vows. She calls on the gods to bless this union, cast white lilies on the water. Kafka peers at things in the bathroom. He fingers clothes in the closet, envies the ethnic green shirt, muses how the purple Chinese dress would look good on any woman. He plays with the radio dial. The sleepers hear Mozart in their dreams. Over the many-crowned Radkani, clouds dispense a chilly bohemian rain. The writer sneaks down Golden Lane, plants spells on doors, plots a formula for turning metal into gold. The sleeping couple stir. Kafka gazes out the window, anticipating tonight's fireworks, shower bursting over the forest. The writer examines his reflection, lean, angular, monochrome. The sleeping couple in the lower half of the frame. A cock crows, a pale sun rises in the east. Kafka pads to the door, joins the maids and early risers in the corridor. Across the city, hangovers alert their owners to the painful cost of letting go. Kafka slips away, nothing here to see or know. Could be here tonight, couldn't be really. Just two more. This is a poem called Regrets. We all have regrets, but in the Financial Times, Lisa Pollock wrote, on their deathbed, no one says they wish they'd gone to more meetings. On his deathbed, he wished he'd gone to more meetings, had more delayed train journeys, waited longer in supermarket queues, encountered more options when phoning the gas board, contributed more to work collections, stayed longer at birthday and Christmas dues, been more fulsome in praise of idiot managers, worked on long after retirement age, forfeiting a globe-trotting pension gap year, an affair with a woman half his age. How much better if there were more dental appointments, more bouts of flu, more spam mail, more sweaty tube journeys, more early morning alarms, hurry, get dressed, there's no time to blink moments. How much better if he wasn't on his deathbed, heading for God knows where, and he awoke in time to hear someone say, that covers everything, do you have any questions? This is the last poem, is the only poem in the collection which isn't new. It has been published before. Well, I wanted to include it because it still seems relevant, and it's about Benjamin Malloysey, who was a South African poet. He was hanged in October 1985, and I wrote this on the bus on the way to work after hearing his mother being interviewed on the radio, and she said that following her son's execution, which had just taken place, that the struggle, the tragedy would inspire the struggle to go on, and it did. When you hang a poet, When you hang a poet, you have not shut his mouth. When you strip his dancing body from the gallows, you have not shut his mouth. When your thieves of the light set his laughing corpse on fire, you have not shut his mouth. When weighted with your guilt, you sink his singing ashes to the ocean floor, you have not shut his mouth. You have opened a door, you have awoken every poet, who will in turn awake 1,000 more. Shelley's unacknowledged legislators of the world, for Africa's sake, demand that this be heard. When you hang a poet, you have not shut his mouth. Listen, he is speaking to you now. You have opened a door through which one day freedom will walk. I've got a tiny encore, since you demanded it. Very demanding way, I thought. The novelist. I said, what do you do? He said, I'm a novelist. I said, you must be imagining things.